My own mother, the woman who gave me life, orchestrated a brutal plot to steal the man I loved and hand him to my sister. Tonight, years later, their faces would turn to ash when they met the man who truly saved me. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a testament to the unyielding strength found when everything you believe in shatters. The air outside was a bitter, biting chill, mirroring the hollowness in my chest. A single, desolate street lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the empty driveway, where my meager belongings were crammed into my old sedan. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic hammering of my own heart, a cruel echo of the slammed door behind me, sealing my fate that night. My name is Chloe Thompson. I'm 27, and until 6 weeks ago, I was just an ordinary kindergarten teacher, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment. My grandparents, Kathleen and William, raised me more than my own parents ever did. They were wealthy, but they were humble, teaching me that character matters infinitely more than cash. When they died in that terrible crash, a drunk driver, a red light, gone in an instant, I was shattered. It was a grief so profound, it stole my breath, left me hollowed out. The officer said they didn't suffer, but that brought little comfort to a heart that felt torn to shreds. Then came the lawyers' meeting. The one where I learned they had left me their entire $26 million estate. $26 million. To me. The room went completely silent when Daniel Sterling, their old family attorney, read it aloud. I couldn't breathe. I was certain I'd misheard. But then, it was confirmed. My biological family, the same people who barely visited Kathleen and William in years, suddenly wanted everything. And when I refused, when I dared to say no to their demands, they kicked me out. That very night. My own parents made me homeless. If you want to see money reveal true colors, stick around. Before I continue, tell me where you're listening from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing your ground when family shows their true colors. Growing up, my parents, Sarah and Frank, were always physically present but emotionally absent. My father worked 60-hour weeks, climbing some corporate ladder, while my mother networked with the right social circles. Family dinners were a myth, and when they happened, my parents were usually glued to their phones, distracted by work calls or social planning. They provided the basics, a roof over my head, clothes on my back, but warmth and guidance? Those were in critically short supply. From the age of 5, I spent every weekend and entire summers with my grandparents. Their modest 4-bedroom house, tucked away on 3 acres with an overflowing vegetable garden, became my true home. Grandpa William taught me how to grow tomatoes and zucchini, his hands rough and stained with earth. Grandma Kathleen showed me how to bake cookies from scratch and sew buttons, her laughter like a melody. They attended every single school play, every soccer game my parents missed. They were simply there. They filled a void in my heart I didn't even realize existed. They had built their fortune from nothing, starting a small logistics company in their garage in the 70s with just one truck and an impossible dream. By the time I was born, Alexander Logistics was a regional powerhouse with a fleet of 200 trucks. Yet, you would never know their net worth by looking at them. Grandpa drove the same pickup truck for 20 years. Grandma clipped coupons and bought clothes on sale. They always told me, money is just a tool, Chloe, not a measurement of your worth. Use it to build something meaningful, not to impress people who don't matter. This philosophy was precisely what created the gaping chasm with my father. As their only son, he grew up expecting to inherit everything, to live a life of luxury. He resented their frugality, calling them stingy and old-fashioned. What they saw as character building, he saw as deprivation. They paid for his college, but expected him to work summer jobs. When he graduated, they helped him with a down payment on a modest starter home, not the luxury condo he craved. The final break came when my father demanded a senior position in their company despite having zero relevant experience. Kathleen and William refused, saying he needed to earn it like everyone else. He stormed out, taking a corporate job instead, and their relationship never truly recovered. For me, they took a different approach. They paid for my education in full, allowing me to graduate debt-free, but they encouraged me to choose a career based on passion, not profit. When I decided to become a kindergarten teacher, they were genuinely thrilled, even though my starting salary was barely above minimum wage. Throughout my adult life, we maintained that close relationship. Standing Sunday dinners every week. I'd help them navigate new technology, showing them how to video chat with a patience I rarely extended to anyone else. They taught me their family recipes and told stories about their youth, stories I now cherish like precious jewels. During holidays, I always stayed with them, which caused endless friction with my mother, who saw it as a personal rejection. My little apartment was small but cozy, filled with second-hand furniture and plants. My salary was modest, but it covered my needs. I found joy in simple pleasures. My grandparents respected my independent lifestyle, though they occasionally surprised me with practical gifts, never lavish, always thoughtful. Then, 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was grading papers on a Tuesday evening when the call came. My grandparents were gone. My world went silent. The funeral was a blur. I remember Sarah and Frank taking charge of the arrangements, arguing with the funeral director about costs. My brother, Tyler, flew in from California, spending most of the time on his phone. My Aunt Michelle cried dramatically for photos, but stopped the moment cameras were put away. Uncle Daniel just stood awkwardly in corners, a shadow. None of them had visited Kathleen and William in years, yet suddenly they were acting like the most grief-stricken family imaginable. I just felt numb. The two people who truly understood and supported me were gone. Their home, once warm and inviting, now stood empty, too painful to enter. I returned to my apartment, took bereavement leave, and tried to process my new reality. 2 weeks later, Daniel Sterling, their attorney, called. He requested that I, along with my immediate family, come to his office for the reading of the will. Little did I know how that meeting would append everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning of the will reading dawned gray and drizzly, a perfect match for my mood. I arrived at Sterling Legal 15 minutes early, dressed in a simple black dress, carrying the umbrella Grandma Kathleen had insisted I keep in my car. The office was in a converted Victorian house, warm with rich wood paneling and aged leather chairs. Daniel, in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, greeted me with a gentle handshake. "I am so sorry for your loss, Chloe," he said quietly. "Kathleen and William were extraordinary people. I will miss our chess games and her lemon bars." His genuine emotion made my eyes well up. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick. "They spoke highly of you too." Before we could continue, the glass door swung open, and my family arrived, a hurricane of entitled energy. My father, Frank, entered first, checking his expensive watch impatiently. At 56, he looked like an older, harder version of my grandfather, but utterly devoid of warmth. My mother, Sarah, followed, her designer handbag probably costing more than my monthly rent. My 25-year-old brother, Tyler, swaggered in, wearing sunglasses indoors. His idea of business attire was a wrinkled button-up shirt partially tucked into jeans. Behind them came Aunt Michelle, Frank's younger sister, already talking loudly on her phone about some perceived slight from her country club friends. Uncle Daniel trailed behind, nodding politely to me, but quickly averting his eyes. "Well, let's get this over with," Frank announced, without bothering with greetings. "Some of us have actual businesses to run." Daniel smiled thinly. "Of course, Frank. Please follow me to the conference room. We are all here now." The tension in the room was palpable as we settled around a large oak table. Frank sat at one end, as if claiming authority, while I chose a seat near Daniel's position at the head. The others arranged themselves according to their usual alliances, Sarah next to Frank, Tyler next to her, Michelle and Daniel across from them. "Before we begin," Daniel said, his voice calm, "I want to clarify that Kathleen and William were of completely sound mind when they updated their will last year. They were thorough in their considerations and explicit in their wishes." My father snorted. "Just read it, Daniel. We know how it goes. Dad built the business. I'm his son. Standard inheritance procedure." Daniel ignored the interruption and opened a leather portfolio. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, William Alexander, and I, Kathleen Alexander, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this our last will and testament." The formal legal language droned on for several minutes. My family shifted impatiently, checking their phones, clearly bored. Finally, he reached the section everyone was waiting for. "We hereby bequeath our entire estate, including but not limited to all cash assets totaling approximately $8 million. Our investment portfolio valued at approximately $12 million. All real estate holdings including our primary residence, valued at $5 million, and our 25% ownership stake in Alexander Logistics, valued at approximately $1 million, to our beloved granddaughter, Chloe Grace Foster." The room went completely silent. I stopped breathing for a moment, certain I had misheard. But Daniel continued, his voice clear. "We specifically and intentionally make no provisions for our son Frank Alexander, our daughter-in-law Sarah Alexander, our grandson Tyler Alexander, our daughter Michelle Davis, or our son-in-law Daniel Davis, as we have provided for them during our lifetime, and have made our reasons clear to our attorney." "Let me see that," my father shouted, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped backward, crashing to the floor. He snatched the document from Daniel's hands, scanning it frantically. This is ridiculous. My mother joined in, her voice shrill, a high-pitched whine. $26 million to a kindergarten teacher? She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that kind of money. Tyler slammed his hand on the table. What about me? I'm family too. I need startup capital for my business ventures. Aunt Michelle turned to me, her face flushed with anger, eyes narrowed. What did you do? How did you manipulate them into this? I sat in shocked silence, a deer caught in headlights, unable to process the onslaught. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos, the sudden violent turn my life had taken. Daniel calmly retrieved the will from my father's grip. If you will all please take your seats. There is more. William and Kathleen recorded a video message to be played at this time. He pressed a button on a remote, and a large screen on the wall illuminated. My grandparents appeared, sitting side by side on their familiar living room sofa. My heart clenched. A sharp, aching pain at seeing them alive again, looking exactly as they had the last time I visited. Grandpa William spoke first, his voice resonating with warmth. If you are watching this, it means we have passed on. We want to explain our decisions directly, to prevent any misunderstandings. Grandma Kathleen continued, her voice gentle but firm, carrying a weight of unspoken disappointment. Frank, Michelle, we love you as our children, but we have been deeply disappointed by the values you have embraced and passed to your own children, with the exception of Chloe. For decades, my grandparents explained, they had watched my father and aunt prioritize material wealth over relationships, treating them as a resource to be tapped rather than as parents to be cherished. They detailed years of missed family events, requested loans never repaid, and dismissive attitudes toward their modest lifestyle. The business we built, Grandpa William said, his gaze steady, was never about amassing wealth for its own sake. It was about creating security for our family and opportunities for our employees. We built it through hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly. Chloe is the only one who has demonstrated these values consistently. Grandma Kathleen added, a soft smile touching her lips, she visits us not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares. She has chosen a career helping children despite the low pay because it fulfills her purpose. We trust Chloe to be a good steward of what we have built. She will honor our legacy and use these resources wisely, not squander them on status symbols or get-rich-quick schemes. The video continued for several more minutes, with my grandparents expressing their hopes for how the inheritance might be used to support education and community development, areas they had always cared about, but had limited time to address while running their business. As the screen went dark, my father exploded. This is absolute garbage. They were clearly senile. We will contest this will. No judge will uphold this insanity. Daniel remained perfectly calm, his voice unwavering. They anticipated that response, Frank. They underwent extensive cognitive testing before finalizing this will, with multiple independent doctors certifying their competence. Additionally, they documented years of behaviors that informed their decision. I must advise you that contesting will be extremely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to succeed. My mother turned to me, her voice suddenly sweet, sickeningly sweet, a saccharine tone that made my skin crawl. Honey, sweetie. Chloe, darling, you understand this isn't right. Your grandparents were confused. This money belongs to the family, not just you. You'll share it with us, won't you? I felt cornered, all eyes on me, the weight of their expectations suffocating. Panic flared. I have to think about this, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, trembling. I had no idea they would do this. Think about it? Tyler scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. There's nothing to think about. That money should be divided equally, or managed by someone with actual business experience. My father interjected, meaning himself, his chest puffed out with self-importance. As the arguing intensified, voices rising in a cacophony of entitlement, Daniel gently touched my arm. His touch was a grounding force. You don't have to decide anything today, Chloe. Take time to process. My office will handle all immediate matters related to the estate. He handed me a thick envelope. This contains all the relevant documents, keys to their house, and contact information for their financial advisors. Call me anytime with questions. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, with threats of lawsuits and accusations flying. Daniel eventually asked everyone to leave. As we filed out, my father grabbed my arm roughly, his grip bruising. This discussion is not over, he hissed, his eyes blazing. Come to our house tonight at 6. We will sort this out as a family. His tone made it clear this was not a request. I nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to argue, my mind reeling. I spent the afternoon in a daze, driving aimlessly around town, the world outside a blur. I finally stopped at a quiet park, the cold biting at my cheeks, trying desperately to gather my thoughts. The envelope from Daniel sat unopened on my passenger seat. Part of me wanted to peek inside, to understand exactly what my grandparents had entrusted to me. Another part was terrified of the responsibility it represented, a dark, heavy cloud hanging over me. At 5:45, I pulled into my parents' driveway, noting that everyone else had already arrived. Their 5,000-square-foot house loomed before me, all granite and glass, designed to impress rather than welcome. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. I took a deep, shaky breath, grabbed the envelope, and headed inside. They were waiting in the formal living room, a space rarely used except for my mother's social gatherings. My father stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in hand, looking like a king on his throne. My mother perched on the edge of an uncomfortable-looking designer chair, her posture stiff with expectation. Tyler sprawled across the sofa, scrolling through his phone, completely disengaged. Aunt Michelle paced nervously, a predatory energy in her movements. Uncle Daniel stood by the window, gazing out, as if wishing to be anywhere else. Finally, my father said when I entered, his voice clipped. "Sit down, Chloe." I chose a chair near the door, a sudden primal instinct telling me I might need a quick exit. "Let us be reasonable about this," my father began, his business negotiation voice in full effect, smooth and condescending. "Your grandparents clearly weren't thinking clearly. They meant for the family to benefit, not just you." My mother nodded enthusiastically, her head bobbing. "Sweetheart, managing wealth is complicated. Your father has the experience to handle this properly. You can still get a nice portion, perhaps enough for a down payment on a real house instead of that apartment." The condescension in her voice made my skin crawl, but I remained silent, a silent observer in my own nightmare. Emboldened by my lack of response, my father continued, his voice growing stronger. "Here's what we propose. You sign over the estate to me, as the financial head of the family. I will ensure everyone gets their fair share. You'll receive 10%, which is more than generous considering your limited needs." 10%, I finally found my voice, a tiny, defiant whisper. That would still be over $2 million. "Exactly." Tyler jumped in, eyes gleaming with avarice. "More than enough for a teacher. I need at least $5 million for my cryptocurrency exchange platform. It's going to be huge." I looked at him skeptically. Tyler had bounced between get-rich-quick schemes for years, never holding a job longer than 3 months. His last venture, an app for rating public restrooms, had collapsed after burning through $50,000 of my parents' money. "The house should go to us," Aunt Michelle interjected, cutting off Tyler, her voice sharp. "We have 3 children to consider. That neighborhood would give them access to better schools." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Michelle had never once visited my grandparents in that house. Her children, my cousins, were strangers who sent obligatory birthday cards with my aunt's handwriting. As the evening progressed, their tactics evolved. When demands didn't work, they switched to guilt. "After all we've done for you," my mother said, her eyes dramatically moist, as if a switch had been flipped. "We gave you life, a good home, opportunities. Is this how you repay family loyalty?" I nearly choked on my water, the bitterness rising in my throat. "Loyalty? When was the last time either of you called just to check on me? When did you ever attend one of my school performances?" The hypocrisy was suffocating. My father changed strategies again, his tone turning cold, menacing. "We're not asking, Chloe. We're telling you what will happen. Either you sign the transfer documents voluntarily, or we will contest the will. We'll bring up every questionable interaction you had with your grandparents. How often did you visit alone? What did you tell them about us when we weren't there? It will get ugly." The threat hung in the air, a chilling, poisonous promise. I felt sick, a nauseous wave washing over me, but something inside me hardened, a steel rod straightening my spine. A memory surfaced of my grandfather teaching me to stand my ground during a playground dispute when I was 8. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away, Chloe," he had said, his voice firm but kind. Asterisk, know what is right and hold firm. Asterisk, his words were a lifeline in the storm. Uncle Daniel, who had remained silent, a ghost in the room, suddenly spoke, his voice tentative. "Maybe we should all calm down and give Chloe some time to think. This is a lot to process." My father rounded on him, a viper striking. "Stay out of this, Daniel. This is family business." "I am family," he responded quietly, a flicker of defiance in his eyes, but immediately retreated when my father glared at him, his face contorted with rage. As the clock ticked past 9, Tyler started drafting transfer paperwork on his laptop, oblivious or uncaring of the escalating tension. My mother called their personal attorney for advice on the wording. Aunt Michelle scrolled through real estate listings for my grandparents' house, talking animatedly about which walls she would knock down first. They had already divided my inheritance without my consent, mapping out how they would spend every dollar. Not once did anyone mention my grandparents' wishes or legacy. Not once did they ask what I thought should be done with the money. It was all about them. At 10:30, my father printed out the crude transfer document and slid it across the coffee table to me, along with a pen. "Sign it," he demanded, his voice low, guttural. "Now." I picked up the paper, my fingers trembling slightly, and read it carefully. The language was broad, essentially signing away all my rights to anything my grandparents had left me. In exchange, I would receive a vague percentage, to be determined later at my father's sole discretion. I put the paper down, the cold wood pressing into my palm, and took a deep breath. The room went silent. "What did you just say?" my father asked, his voice dangerously low, a coiled threat. I said no. The words came out stronger than I expected, ringing with a surprising clarity in the silent room. "I will not sign this or anything like it. My grandparents trusted me with their legacy for a reason. I intend to honor that trust." My mother launched into a furious tirade about ingratitude, her face blotchy with anger. Tyler called me names I won't repeat, venom dripping from his words. Aunt Michelle began sobbing dramatically about her children's future, a performance worthy of an Oscar. Through it all, I sat still, the single word no becoming a shield around me, impenetrable. Finally, my father slammed his glass down so hard it cracked, shards of ice scattering. "That is enough," he roared, his face purple with fury. "I always told Dad you weren't to be trusted. You manipulated them, just like you're trying to manipulate us now with this innocent act." He stalked toward me, pointing his finger inches from my face, his breath hot on my skin. "You have a choice to make right now, Chloe. Either you sign that paper and remain part of this family, or you take your precious inheritance and consider yourself disowned. You cannot have both." The ultimatum hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I looked around at the faces of my family members, searching desperately for any sign of love or understanding. I found none. Only anger, greed, and cold indifference. In that moment, a painful truth solidified: they had never really seen me as family. I was just a means to an end, a potential source of money, nothing more. The realization was a sharp, brutal ache. "I am not signing," I said firmly, standing up, my voice trembling slightly but resolute. "I'm sorry you feel this way, but I have to respect what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." "Then get out of my house," my father snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Pack your things and leave tonight. You are no longer welcome here." "I live in my own apartment," I reminded him, a futile protest. "I have for years." He laughed coldly, a cruel, mirthless sound. "The apartment we co-signed for because your teacher's salary couldn't qualify for the lease? Check your agreement, Chloe. We owned that building through one of our investment companies. Consider your lease terminated." My stomach dropped, a cold, sickening plunge. He was right. When I couldn't qualify for the apartment on my own, they had offered to help. I never realized they actually owned the building through a shell company, a hidden trap. "You have 30 minutes to pack essential items," my mother said, checking her watch, her tone chillingly calm, as if this were a business transaction. "The locks will be changed tomorrow." I stood frozen in shock, numb. They were actually kicking me out, making me homeless over money they had never earned. My biological family. My parents. "The clock is ticking," Tyler smirked, leaning against the wall, a smug, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Better hurry, sis. Those 26 million won't keep you warm tonight." 30 minutes. Not long to pack up your life. I moved on autopilot, my body a puppet on strings, grabbing clothes, toiletries, important documents, and a few sentimental items. My mind kept spinning with disbelief. How could they do this? How could money turn my family into complete strangers? My father stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, arms crossed, watching me like a guard ensuring a prisoner didn't steal anything during transfer. My mother stayed downstairs, already on the phone with a real estate agent about selling my grandparents' house. Her voice carried up the stairs, a distant, callous murmur. "You were never really part of this family anyway," my father said coldly as I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your mother and I were going to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together." The casual cruelty of his revelation staggered me, a physical blow. I had always sensed I was unwanted, a burden, but having it confirmed so bluntly was another matter entirely, tearing a fresh wound in my soul. "We've wasted enough time and money on you," my mother added, appearing in the doorway, her eyes hard. "Your private school tuition, braces, summer camps, all those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment." Investment. Not love or care, but investment. As if I were a stock that had performed poorly, a failed venture. Tyler appeared next, leaning against the wall with that same smug expression. "You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one," he said, his voice laced with malicious satisfaction. "That money will run out faster than you think. And then what? You'll come crawling back, and we'll remember how you chose cash over family." I zipped up my final bag, my hands shaking, fighting back a torrent of tears. I was determined not to cry in front of them. I would not give them the satisfaction. "Is that everything?" my father demanded, his voice impatient. I looked around the room that had been mine since childhood, though I had only stayed here occasionally since college. The ballet trophies, the framed diploma, the bookshelf filled with novels, the photo albums. So much left behind, so many memories that now felt tainted. "I can come back for the rest later," I said, my voice barely steady. My father laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "There won't be a later. Whatever you leave tonight goes to charity or the trash. Your call." The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. They were erasing me from their lives completely. All because I wouldn't give them money they had done nothing to earn. I grabbed my grandmother's quilt from the bed, its familiar scent of faint comfort, and stuffed it into my already overflowing bag. I would not leave that behind. With 3 bags slung over my shoulders and another in my hand, I made my way downstairs. No one offered to help. At the front door, I turned around one last time, my eyes sweeping over their faces. My family stood in a rigid line, faces set in various expressions of anger, disappointment, and smug satisfaction. "You might have money now," my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain, "but family is forever. You'll realize what you've thrown away." "I'm not the one throwing away family," I replied quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, though my heart was pounding. "You are." With that, I walked out the door and into the cool night air. The door slammed behind me with a disturbing, definitive finality. Standing beside my car in the driveway, I suddenly felt the entire weight of everything crashing down. I was effectively homeless. My apartment was no longer mine. My family had disowned me. In the span of a few hours, I had gained millions, but lost the only support system I had ever known, flawed as it was. I sat in my car and finally allowed the tears to come, hot and fast, streaming down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. Great heaving sobs racked my entire body, shaking me to my core. I cried for my grandparents, whose absence felt more acute than ever. I cried for the family I had always hoped for, but never truly had. Mostly, I cried for myself, suddenly adrift, alone, in a world that had completely changed. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, took a shuddering breath, and started the car. I had nowhere to go. Hotels required credit cards with available limits I didn't have. Friends were an option, but explaining this unimaginable situation seemed impossible at nearly midnight. Then, a flicker of hope, a small spark in the darkness. I remembered the envelope Daniel had given me. Pulling it out, I found a set of keys with a familiar rabbit-shaped keychain Grandma Kathleen had cherished. The keys to my grandparents' house. The house that was now, unbelievably, mine. The drive to their neighborhood took 20 minutes. With each mile, I felt simultaneously pulled toward the comfort of their home and terrified of entering it without them there. I had avoided the house since the funeral, unable to face the emptiness, the echoing silence. The porch light was on when I arrived, probably on a timer Grandpa William had set. I sat in the driveway for several minutes, gathering courage, trying to steel myself. Finally, I grabbed one bag and approached the front door, the key shaking visibly in my hand. The house smelled exactly the same, a comforting mixture of my grandmother's lemon verbena potpourri and the wood polish my grandfather used on the furniture every Sunday. I flipped on the lights, half expecting to hear their voices calling a greeting from the kitchen. The silence was deafening, crushing. I made my way to the guest room I had always used, dropping my bag on the bed. Everything was exactly as I had left it after my last weekend visit, a month before the accident. The novel I had been reading still sat on the nightstand, a bookmark indicating my progress. Fresh towels were folded on the dresser, placed there by my grandmother in anticipation of my next stay. The thoughtfulness of it, the expectation of continuity they couldn't have known would be broken, undid me again. I sank onto the bed and cried until exhaustion overtook me, falling asleep fully clothed on top of the covers. Morning came with disorienting brightness, the sun streaming through the window, a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. For a moment, I expected to smell coffee brewing and hear my grandfather's off-key whistling from downstairs. Reality crashed back as I recognized the profound silence. They were gone, and somehow I had inherited both their fortune and their enemies, all in the form of my own family. My phone had blown up overnight with texts and missed calls, most from my father and mother, alternating between blatant threats and sudden, sickeningly sweet attempts at reconciliation. "We can work this out if you'll be reasonable," read one message from my mother, a thinly veiled demand. My father was less subtle, "You have 24 hours to reconsider before we file suit." Tyler sent a single text, laced with malevolence, "Enjoying the big empty house? Not for long." That last one sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like a threat, not just bluster. My hands instinctively tightened around my phone. I forwarded it to Daniel, who responded immediately. "Stay where you are. I will be there in 30 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone else." His urgency alarmed me, but also provided a strange, unexpected comfort. At least someone was on my side. Daniel arrived exactly 30 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and a cardboard drink carrier with 2 steaming coffees. I ushered him into the kitchen, where we sat at the breakfast nook my grandparents had used for casual meals. "First things first," he said, sliding a coffee toward me, its warmth seeping into my chilled hands. "Your family has already contacted 3 different attorneys about contesting the will. I anticipated this and have prepared countermeasures." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, trying to steady myself. "They kicked me out last night. My father apparently owns my apartment building through some investment company." Daniel nodded grimly. Typical Frank tactics. Using leverage to force compliance. He began pulling documents from his briefcase, a stack of papers growing between us. "What he didn't tell you is that your grandparents provided for this exact scenario." He showed me a deed to a small cottage about 20 minutes outside town. "Your grandmother bought this property 5 years ago as an investment, but kept it in a separate trust for you. Frank doesn't know about it. You have somewhere to go if you need it." Relief washed over me, a fragile, trembling wave. At least I wouldn't be truly homeless. But the idea of hiding out while my family circled like vultures didn't sit well. My anger flared anew. "There's something else you should know," Daniel continued, his eyes meeting mine. "You are not alone in this. Your grandparents had many loyal friends and associates who understood the situation with your family." As if on cue, a soft knock sounded at the back door. Daniel smiled. That would be Miguel. Miguel. The name was vaguely familiar. "Miguel Ramirez," Daniel explained. "He has been your grandparents' estate manager and handyman for 15 years. He lives in the guest house at the back of the property." I answered the door to find a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, weathered by the sun. He held his hat in his hands respectfully. "Miss Chloe," he said warmly, his voice gentle. "I am very sorry about your grandparents. They were wonderful people. I saw your car this morning and wanted to check if you needed anything." The simple, genuine kindness nearly brought me to tears again, a stark contrast to the previous night's cruelty. "Thank you, Miguel. I'm a bit overwhelmed, to be honest." Miguel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Mr. William and Mrs. Kathleen worried about that. They asked me to look after you if anything happened to them. The house, the grounds, everything is maintained. I've been keeping watch." Daniel invited Miguel to join us. Over the next hour, Miguel shared stories about my grandparents that I had never heard, painting a picture of 2 people who were respected and beloved by those who worked for them, not just their entitled family members. It was a comforting balm to my wounded spirit. "Your father and brother," Miguel said carefully, his voice lowered. "They came here after the funeral, when no one was around. They took things. Watches, jewelry, some electronics. I have it all on the security cameras." My stomach clenched. My father had installed an extensive security system for my grandparents years ago, supposedly for their protection. I had forgotten about the cameras. Miguel shook his head sadly. "They didn't know Mr. William had me update the system last year. Said it had too many blind spots compared to the one your father put in." Daniel made a note, his pen scratching against the paper. "That footage could be useful if they pursue legal action." "There's more," Miguel continued. "Mrs. Kathleen kept detailed journals. She documented everything, especially family visits and interactions. They are in her study." I followed Miguel to my grandmother's small study off the main hallway. A built-in bookcase held dozens of leather-bound journals, each meticulously dated. Miguel pulled one from the shelf and handed it to me. "This one mentions when your father asked for money last year," he said, "for some investment opportunity." I opened the journal, immediately recognizing my grandmother's elegant handwriting, a familiar comfort. May 15th, Frank visited today, first time in 7 months. Did not ask about our health or lives. Immediately launched into pitch about cryptocurrency investment requiring $250,000. When William refused, Frank became hostile, accused us of preferring Chloe. Said we were naive to trust her, when she only visits to secure her inheritance. Could not be more wrong. Chloe has never asked for money, has no idea of our net worth. Brings food every Sunday and stays to eat with us. Frank left without finishing his coffee. William very upset afterward. I read entry after entry, each one documenting years of similar interactions. My father demanding money. My brother pitching absurd business ideas. My mother making thinly veiled comments about their modest lifestyle being embarrassing to her social standing. In contrast, my visits were described with genuine warmth. My grandmother noted small gifts I had brought, conversations we had shared, help I had offered around the house. She saw me in a way my parents never had, truly saw me. As I read, the doorbell rang. Miguel went to answer it, returning with an older woman in a practical dress and cardigan. "Brenda Hayes," he introduced her. "Your grandparents' housekeeper for 20 years. Brenda hugged me tightly, a strong, comforting embrace. "You look just like Kathleen when she was young," she said, her eyes twinkling. "She was so proud of you." Over the next several hours, more people arrived, a steady stream of kindness and support. Lena Garcia, my grandparents' business partner, who knew every detail of Alexander Logistics and offered to guide me through understanding the company. Dr. Anya Sharma, their investment advisor, who brought comprehensive portfolios, showing exactly how my inheritance was structured. Linda Peterson, their neighbor for 30 years, who brought a homemade casserole and stories about neighborhood gatherings I had attended as a child. Each person who arrived brought not only information but genuine affection. They had all loved my grandparents, and by extension, cared about me and my well-being. It was overwhelming, in the best possible way. While going through my grandmother's desk, Brenda found a hidden compartment containing letters from my father spanning decades. Each one requested money, some with thinly veiled threats about cutting off access to me if they refused. She also kept this, Brenda said, handing me a USB drive, security footage from after the funeral. "Your mother was going through Kathleen's jewelry before the reception even ended. She took several valuable pieces, claiming Kathleen would have wanted her to have them." My grandparents, it seemed, had been meticulously documenting my family's behavior for years. Perhaps knowing this day would come, they had created not just a financial safety net for me, but a powerful network of support and damning evidence that would protect their wishes. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, as Daniel was guiding me through the complex financial documents, my phone pinged with a text from Tyler. "Hope you're enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. Dad, Mom, Aunt Michelle, Uncle Daniel, and I are coming over tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to collect what rightfully belongs to us. Better not try to stop us, or things will get ugly." I showed the message to Daniel, whose expression darkened, a grim line forming on his lips. "Threats and potential breaking and entering," he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. "I think it's time to activate the final part of your grandparents' plan." He made several phone calls in quick succession, speaking cryptically about meetings and evidence. When he finished, he turned to me with a determined expression. "Your grandparents anticipated this exact scenario, Chloe. They knew Frank and the others would not accept their decision. They prepared for it. Tomorrow morning, we will be ready for them. But tonight, I suggest you review these materials so you understand exactly what you are fighting for." He gestured to the pile of journals, financial documents, and legal papers spread across the dining room table. "Your grandparents built more than just wealth. They built relationships based on trust and respect. That is their true legacy to you." As everyone except Miguel left for the evening, promising to return the next morning, I felt a strange calm settling over me. I was not alone in this fight. My grandparents had ensured that. They had given me not just their money, but their wisdom and their community. I spent the evening reading through journals and financial reports, getting to know my grandparents in a new way. They had been strategic, thoughtful, and meticulous in their planning. Everything they had done was deliberate, including their choice of heir. For the first time since the will reading, I felt equal to the responsibility they had entrusted me with. I would not let them down. As I prepared for bed, another text came through from Tyler. "Better sleep with one eye open, sis. Tomorrow you'll see what happens to people who steal from this family. Instead of fear, I felt resolve hardening within me, a cold, unshakable certainty. Tomorrow would indeed show what happens when people try to steal from family, but not in the way Tyler imagined. I woke early the next morning, anxious but determined, a quiet storm brewing within me. By 8 a.m., Daniel had arrived with coffee and pastries, along with a thick folder of legal documents. These are restraining orders, ready to be filed if necessary, he explained, his voice calm and professional. And these are cease and desist letters addressing the specific threats Tyler made. Brenda arrived next, immediately taking over the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The familiar smells of bacon and coffee filled the house, providing strange comfort before the coming storm. By 9:30, the house had filled with supporters. Miguel positioned himself by the front door, a silent, unwavering guardian. Lena Garcia, my grandparents' business partner, set up her laptop at the dining table, ready to present financial evidence if needed. Brenda bustled around, ensuring everyone had coffee and food, her presence alone a grounding connection to my grandparents' hospitality. At 9:45, cars began pulling into the long driveway. First, my father's black luxury sedan, then my mother's white SUV, followed by Aunt Michelle and Uncle Daniel's midlife crisis convertible, and finally Tyler's impractical sports car, which he could only afford because my parents paid his rent. "They're early," Daniel observed, a slight grimace on his face, trying to catch us off guard. As the doorbell rang aggressively, a furious, impatient rhythm, followed by pounding, Daniel nodded to Miguel, who opened the door. My father stood on the threshold, momentarily surprised, his jaw slacking slightly, to see someone other than me answering. Behind him, the rest of my family clustered together, expressions ranging from angry to smug, a pack of wolves at the door. "Where's Chloe?" my father demanded, his voice thick with authority. "This is family business." Miguel remained immovable, his stance solid. "Miss Chloe is expecting you. Please come in." My family filed into the foyer, stopping short when they saw the gathering in the living room. I stood in the center, unyielding, with Daniel slightly behind me to my right, a silent bastion of support. "What is this?" my mother asked, her voice brittle with indignation. "You brought outsiders into a private family matter." Before I could answer, the front door opened again, and 3 more people entered. First came Judge Evelyn Reed, a tall, dignified woman in her 70s who had been my grandparents' friend for decades. She was followed by Police Chief Mark Jensen, whose daughter's education had been supported by my grandparents' charitable foundation. Last came Mr. Kenji Tanaka, my grandparents' financial advisor for over 20 years. My father's face paled at the sight of Judge Reed. The judge had ruled against him in a business dispute years earlier, a case my father had tried unsuccessfully to influence through social connections. "Evelyn," he said, attempting a jovial tone that fell flat, his voice cracking. "What brings you here?" The judge's expression remained stern, her gaze unwavering. "I am here at the request of William and Kathleen Alexander, through their attorney, Daniel Sterling. They asked me, in the event of their deaths, to serve as an impartial witness to any family disputes regarding their estate." My mother turned to Chief Jensen, her eyes wide with a sudden dawning fear. "This is ridiculous. We are here to collect family heirlooms that rightfully belong to us. Why is law enforcement present?" The chief smiled thinly, a chilling, professional smile. "I am here as a friend of the Alexander family, not in an official capacity. Unless, of course, someone commits a crime, in which case my official duties would naturally take precedence." The implied threat was not lost on any of us. The air grew heavy with unspoken consequences. As if on cue, the back door opened, and 6 more people entered, forming a semicircle behind me. They were long-time employees from my grandparents' business, people who had known my father since childhood and had witnessed his transformation from entitled son to absent family member. Their quiet presence was a powerful statement. "You've got to be kidding me," Tyler muttered, his swagger evaporating, replaced by a tremor of unease. "Is this supposed to intimidate us?" I stepped forward, finding strength in the unwavering support surrounding me, a formidable wall of loyalty. "I know why you are here. You believe you are entitled to my grandparents' estate, despite their explicit wishes. You think you can bully or threaten me into giving you what you want." My voice was calm, steady, filled with a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. My father's face hardened, a mask of defiance. "Those old fools were manipulated. We are simply here to correct that injustice." From behind me, Mr. Tanaka spoke up, his voice precise and professional. "Actually, Frank, I have documentation of every attempt you made to access your parents' assets over the last 20 years. He opened a folder, its contents damning. This includes the unauthorized transfer attempt from their retirement account in 2016, the forged check incident in 2018, and your attempt to have Kathleen declared incompetent last year after she refused to fund Tyler's failed cryptocurrency venture. My father's face went green, his color draining away. But that is taken out of context. He blustered, a desperate, pathetic sound. Lena Garcia stepped forward, tablet in hand, her eyes sharp. I also have records of the company loan you never repaid, Frank. $200,000 borrowed in 2012 for your vacation home in Aspen. Your parents never pursued repayment, though they certainly could have. One by one, my grandparents' friends and associates presented evidence of my family's attempts to extract money over the years, contrasted with their minimal involvement in my grandparents' actual lives. It was a brutal, undeniable indictment. Aunt Michelle, who had been quietly fuming, suddenly turned to me, her face contorted with pure hatred. You ungrateful little snake. You turned our parents against us, poisoned them with lies. Judge Reed cleared her throat, a small but commanding sound that cut through Michelle's outburst. Actually, Mrs. Davis, I reviewed the video journals Kathleen kept. There was no external influence. Your parents were quite clear about their reasoning. This is all very theatrical, my mother said dismissively, attempting to regain control, but her voice wavered. But it changes nothing. We will contest the will. We will win. Daniel stepped forward, a stack of envelopes in his hand. I have prepared documentation for you all. It includes evidence that would become public record if you contest the will. He handed each family member a thick envelope, the rustle of paper the only sound. This includes banking records, text messages, emails, and video evidence of your interactions with William and Kathleen over the past decade. I encourage you to review it before making decisions about legal action. Uncle Daniel, who had remained silent until now, a bystander to his own life, opened his envelope and began reading. His face grew increasingly pale, a stark white. After a moment, he touched Aunt Michelle's arm, his voice a quiet plea. We should go, he said. This is not a fight we can win. She shrugged him off angrily, still clinging to a lost cause. My father, however, had gone very still after scanning the contents of his envelope. There were records of business dealings he had clearly hoped would remain private, along with transcripts of cruel comments he had made about his parents when he thought no one was listening. The mask had finally fallen. Chief Jensen stepped forward, his presence commanding. I should also mention that the property is under 24-hour security surveillance. Any attempt to remove items without permission would constitute theft. Miguel nodded, his gaze unwavering. The new system records everything, inside and out. All backed up to secure cloud storage. As my family absorbed the damning implications, the reality of their defeat, I walked to the sideboard and picked up a stack of documents Daniel had prepared. These are cease and desist orders regarding the threats you have made, I said, my voice clear and firm, passing them to Tyler. These, I continued, handing papers to my father, are notices that I am aware of the items taken from this house after the funeral and expect their immediate return. My mother began to protest, her mouth opening, but I cut her off. And these, I said, giving her the final document, my gaze locked with hers, are the terms under which I am willing to maintain any relationship with you all going forward. They include respect for my grandparents' wishes and an end to all attempts to contest the will. The room fell silent, a heavy, suffocating silence, as my family finally realized the untenable position they were in. Not only had my grandparents legally protected their decisions, but they had anticipated and documented every possible challenge. The community of support they had built stood firmly with me, presenting a united front my family had not expected. Their greedy machinations had backfired spectacularly. My father was the first to break, his shoulders slumping. This is not over, he said, but the defeat in his voice, the utter lack of conviction, suggested otherwise. Actually, Frank, it is, Judge Reed replied, her voice ringing with authority. Your parents were meticulous in their planning. Any judge in this county would uphold their wishes based on the evidence they compiled. One by one, my family members retreated toward the door, their threats dissolving, their bravado crumbling in the face of the overwhelming evidence against them. Tyler glared at me as he passed, his eyes full of resentment. This isn't the end, he muttered, a childish threat. Perhaps not, I replied calmly, meeting his gaze. But it is the end of you taking advantage of this family. My grandparents saw who you really are. That is why we are all here today. As they filed out to their cars, the tension in the room finally dissipated, a heavy cloak lifting. Brenda immediately began serving fresh coffee and pastries, as if to cleanse the space of the negative energy they had brought. The others gathered around, offering congratulations and heartfelt support. I felt strangely empty, neither triumphant nor devastated. I had stood my ground, protected my grandparents' wishes, but lost what remained of my family in the process. The victory, in a way, felt hollow. Judge Reed seemed to sense my conflict. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "Your grandparents would be proud, Chloe. Not just of what you did today, but how you did it, with dignity and principle." Lena nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with respect. "You are more like them than anyone else in the family. That is why they trusted you with everything." As my biological family's cars disappeared down the driveway, leaving only exhaust fumes and a lingering sense of relief, I realized I had crossed a profound threshold. The family I had known was gone, irrevocably broken by greed. But in their place stood a community bound by genuine respect and shared values, the true legacy my grandparents had built over a lifetime. It was not the family I was born into, but perhaps it was the family I was meant to have all along. 6 months passed in a blur of learning and adjustment. The first weeks after the confrontation were the hardest, filled with legal paperwork, financial decisions, and the painful process of accepting that my biological family had chosen money over relationship. They made a few half-hearted attempts to reconcile, but only when they needed something, proving that nothing had really changed. My boundaries, once so difficult to set, were now firmly in place. With guidance from Daniel and my grandparents' advisors, I established the Kathleen and William Alexander Foundation for Education, dedicating $10 million to supporting underprivileged students and schools in our community. The foundation focused particularly on arts, education, and vocational training, areas my grandparents had always believed were undervalued. I returned to teaching kindergarten, much to the surprise of those who thought I would quit once wealthy. My classroom at Sunshine Elementary became a showcase for what was possible with proper resources. I personally funded new books, art supplies, and technology that the school budget could never cover. Every child got healthy snacks daily and winter coats if they needed them, small expenses for me that made huge differences in their lives. Under Lena Garcia's mentorship, I learned the basics of running Alexander Logistics. While I didn't take an active management role, I ensured the company maintained my grandparents' values, including their profit-sharing program for employees and generous retirement benefits. The business continued to thrive, providing stable employment for over 100 people in our community. My grandparents' house, once painfully empty, gradually became a home again. I moved from the guest room into the master bedroom, though it took months before I could sleep there without feeling like an intruder. With Miguel's help, I renovated the large basement into a vibrant community space for foundation events and educational programs. Brenda still came 3 times a week, refusing to fully retire, despite my insistence she had earned it. She was family now. My biological family made occasional attempts to re-establish contact, though their motives were transparent, sickeningly so. My father called when his company faced cash flow problems, hinting broadly about short-term loans with handsome returns. My mother reached out when her social circle learned about my foundation, suddenly wanting to serve on the board. Tyler texted when his latest venture failed, asking for startup capital. Aunt Michelle called around the holidays, suggesting family should be together, especially family with large houses suitable for hosting gatherings. Each time, I politely but firmly maintained my boundaries, referring them to the terms I had established after the confrontation. I would consider a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care, but not one based on financial advantage. None of them could meet those simple terms. They never even tried. Instead, I built new traditions with the chosen family my grandparents had cultivated. Sunday dinners continued, now hosted by me, with rotating guests including Lena, Daniel, Miguel and his family, Brenda, and others who had been part of my grandparents' circle. We celebrated holidays together, shared milestones, and supported each other through difficulties. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was a community bound by something stronger than DNA, shared values and genuine affection. One crisp autumn morning, similar to the day of their accident, I visited my grandparents' graves for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the small bench nearby, finally ready to have the conversation I had been avoiding for so long. "I'm trying my best to honor what you built," I told them, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking aloud to the quiet stones. "The foundation is making a difference. 3 students have already received full college scholarships who otherwise couldn't have gone. Your employees still speak about you with such respect." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, sending golden leaves spiraling downward. It was the kind of beautiful fall day my grandmother had loved, perfect for baking and reading by the fireplace. "I wish you were here to see it all," I continued, a pang in my heart. "I have so many questions about decisions you made, investments you chose, people you helped, but I'm figuring it out step by step." In the months since inheriting, I had discovered numerous quiet charities my grandparents had supported anonymously, children whose medical bills they had paid, families whose homes they had saved from foreclosure, employees whose children they had put through college, all without public recognition or praise. Their kindness ran deeper than I ever knew. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I understand now why you made the choice you did. It was never really about the money. It was about values, about using resources for something meaningful, rather than status or power." As I sat there, memories washed over me, not with the sharp pain of recent grief, but with a bittersweet appreciation for the time we had shared. I remembered my grandfather teaching me to fish, his patient hands guiding mine, my grandmother showing me how to make her famous apple pie, the scent of cinnamon filling the air, both of them attending every school play and graduation when my parents were too busy, too absent. The inheritance had never been primarily about money. It had been about entrusting me with their legacy, their values, their vision of what wealth could accomplish when used with purpose and compassion. The next day, I hosted the foundation's first major event, a scholarship ceremony for 20 high school seniors who would receive full college funding. As I watched these bright, determined young people accept opportunities that would change their trajectories, I felt my grandparents' presence strongly, a warm, guiding force. Among the recipients was Maria Vasquez, a brilliant young woman who reminded me so much of myself at that age, full of potential but limited by financial constraints. She planned to become a teacher, to give back to her community just as she had been supported. As the event concluded, Maria approached me, tears in her eyes, her voice choked with emotion. "My parents both work 2 jobs," she said. "No one in my family has ever gone to college. This changes everything, not just for me, but for my younger siblings who now see it as possible." In that moment, a profound clarity washed over me. I understood completely what my grandparents had been building all along. Not just a business or a fortune, but a legacy of positive impact. A ripple effect that would continue long after they were gone. They had trusted me to amplify that effect, to carry their values forward in ways they would never see, but had so clearly envisioned. The money had indeed revealed true colors, showing me who valued wealth over relationship. But it had also revealed a community of genuine connection, people who had loved my grandparents for who they were, not what they owned. That, I realized, was the true inheritance, more valuable than any dollar amount. As I move forward, I continue teaching, running the foundation, and learning the business. The wealth allows me to amplify good work, to make a tangible difference, but it does not define me. I still live relatively simply, drive a practical car, and spend weekends volunteering rather than shopping. My grandparents would approve, I think. They always said money was a tool, not a goal. I finally, truly, understand what they meant. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to pressure from loved ones, especially when inheritance or deeply held values were involved? Was it worth the fight? I'd love to hear your stories and reflections in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground. Remember, family is about love and respect, not obligation or advantage. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to honor your own values, whatever challenges you may face. Outro music fades in.